Hello everyone, welcome to Heart and Hand Rangers podcast. This is your extra show for the week. My name is Cammy Bell. I am your host as always, and joining me on this week's extra, taking a break in between golf rounds, is my very good pal and stalwart of the pod, Alan Bradley. Alan, thank you for coming off the links to come on and talk about Rangers.
Sorry, Cammy. That's fine. I decided to delay things today, mate. I've got the factor 50 cream and all that ready. Probably teeing off, a wee bit later on. So, but no, everything's fine. Not very good at the golf. I'm just really waiting on some kind of American group coming in, maybe taking over, reducing my handicap. But I don't know, pal. Yeah, but great to be on. Great to join you again. Yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine, like Rangers, your game would start to improve if you can see brighter things in the horizon.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I'm looking at the moment. I'm going through a very dark tunnel, but I'm just worried it's not a train or something, Cammy. But we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, Alan. Let's jump into it because Rangers were in action for our last game of the season at Ibrox last night against Dundee United. There's a lot of talk around. Obviously, last weekend's game against Aberdeen, Barry Ferguson, as interim manager, was yet to have a win at Ibrox. He was successful in achieving that win. I kind of did mention on last week's extra that the main topics of conversation with Ferguson and these dead rubbers until the season concludes as to whether or not he would go with a slightly unorthodox team selection in order to be able to try and maybe get in some of the youth, some of the guys who haven't played as frequently and we anticipate will be here next season. But I understood why he went with the team that he did to be able to get that win, because he did not want to be the first Rangers manager not to get a win at Ibrox, and not having achieved a home victory since February was frankly unacceptable, and I'm fairly sure will never be repeated, but he was able to achieve that. And last night, Ibrox, I think it's fair to say, far from full. I'm not going to call it necessarily a convincing win against Dundee United. We will obviously talk about how the game unfolded and the quality of the goals, because I think that's very, very important. But Ferguson sticking with a lineup that he knows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What was your thoughts on all of that?
Same, pretty much the same as you, Cammy. I understood why he did it, obviously, at the weekend. Last night, I was expecting maybe a few more changes on it. But to be honest with you, I think we're just at that stage in obviously at the end of the season anyway. The only thing is, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes in terms of who potentially is kind of staying, who's going, who's still carrying injuries and so on. I think that's my only frustration. So I don't know answers to all of that. Obviously, Barry and the people behind the scenes will. Because you would have kind of expected maybe even kind of Bailey Rice maybe coming on. What about a wee chance for Cortez and Danilo and so on? And so that seems to be certainly the guy next to me at the football. That was a kind of conversation early on. Look, there's certain players, okay, are maybe going. Why are we even playing them now and so on? So it just seemed a bit of just a kind of mix, around it. Obviously, things kind of worked out at the end. But as I say, if we knew clearly, Cammy, like certain players were, it looks as if they were going to be staying. And for example, I think the Rice, although nothing's been confirmed with anyone, but you're kind of thinking one for the future. I would have thought it might have been quite nice just giving a wee bit more time, on it. There's other people that are obviously going, that will be going as well. So to be honest with you, just a kind of wee mix-up. I don't really think, and I suppose the other criticism that would maybe come of him if he suddenly made 4 or 5 of them and it didn't work out, we then end up having another defeat. So I don't know. It's just a kind of hard to fathom. We'll go through obviously the game. Ultimately, we ended up with the win, which we'll go into. So that in itself is good, but I don't really think we can read too much into it in terms of even Barry's being here. I thought smashing that he did step up. I personally didn't think he was going to be someone who was going to get it anyway permanently. It would have had to have been, winning the Europa League or something, which was unrealistic. He did it, obviously inherited a complete mess anyway. I think, and it was patchy again. He did well to raise them, obviously, during the old firm. So he gave us some of that, connection with the fans. This is what it's all about, and so on. Did okay, obviously, in one part of Europe as well, but overall, I don't think he really did enough. But looking at the fact that if he is going, which I think it looks like that anyway. Yeah, I mean, well done for coming in, as any Rangers fan would do, or anybody that loved the club, and he did actually apply himself as best as he could. But as I say, I think it was a thanks very much, Barry, and obviously now we're just looking for kind of what happens next.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of that. Regular listeners will know I wasn't overly excited at the idea of Barry Ferguson coming in as interim. I understood why, and it made sense. And I have no idea what conversations were had at the time as to whether or not there was a carrot on the stick of being able to say, well, if you can come in and we can see real progress.
Mm-hmm.
The Europa League was, I think, out of sight in terms of being a realistic aim. But he was able to get results, as you say, in certain games. But for me, the negative column outweighs the positive column. And looking at it pragmatically and maybe taking your heart out of the conversation and purely just looking at the logic side of things, he's not done enough to merit it. And that's fine, right? Understand that. He's inherited a very, very poor squad. And I don't necessarily just mean in terms of quality. I just mean in terms of overall emphasis, and the fact that even with a support team and the management group that he was able to bring in some fresh ideas, and maybe just even do that thing that a lot of footballers talk about, which is, doing a little bit of a kind of cleanse of the atmosphere if there was, some low morale under Philippe Clement. And we've got no idea, by the way, I'm just speculating, but you do get that, and we've seen it a lot, actually, when new managers come in, there does seem to be a reaction, and these players have been good at being able to show reaction. However, domestically, I don't think that we got any longevity in that. But we'll get on to the game last night. And some of those ghosts came back to haunt us under Barry Ferguson. A decent start by Rangers, I thought. He went with that fairly tried and tested lineup as well, so there was no real surprise. I think everybody knew what they were going to get at that point. And despite being able to try and give a little bit of pressure towards a Dundee United goal, Dundee United take the lead. Now, this, within isolation, is something which has really, really frustrated me across the course of this season. And it is this disorganisation. I can absolutely appreciate that we've had to chop and change the defence a little bit, that back five. So obviously we have to include the goalkeepers within that as well. But this is a corner which comes in at the near post. Tavernier loses his man. I don't think that there's any real substance to how they were looking to be able to try and set up to get that ball dealt with. And yeah, like I say, a half-empty Ibrox watches the goal sail past Jack Butland at his far post, and Dundee United are now 1-0 up. Dundee United were competitive to an extent because obviously they do have things to play for in terms of European places, etc.
Yeah.
But this was another poor goal to lose. And this is the kind of thing that we've become so accustomed to seeing, that hopefully, all things going well when we get into the beginning of the next season, we'll see eradicated. But it's just, how many times have we seen this movie before?
It's absolutely so frustrating because it's just the basics, and I mean, and every team now, I think, that plays against us, certainly domestically, they just know. And I think what gets me, to be honest with you, more than anything, it happens, I'm absolutely disappointed. It's the astonishment in our defence. They're looking at their faces as if what just happened there. It's like, I mean, have you never played football before? As I say, I think the two of them at the front, there was kind of two at the front, maybe Suter, I don't know, maybe Balogun, but there's two of them at the front anyway, and obviously they didn't get it. And as you say, Tav, kind of again, guy manages to kind of make the move in to go. The keeper just looks a wee bit, what happened? But Cammy, we've seen it all the time. It's just absolutely it's so frustrating, and I don't know, in terms of kind of coaching, and but if you do it once, if you do it twice and so on, but I'm telling you, Cammy, you could probably go back this season and we've maybe lost, 10 or more, double figures of these type of goals, and from previous seasons as well. It's so basic. And the frustrating thing as well is you can do all the nice wee third man running, all the wee coaching, all the stuff that they do, and we'll get on to one of the goals, some absolutely wonderful football. But the bottom line is, if you can't blooming just defend a corner or like a long throw in, it's like, what's the point? And it was the same. It's been a theme for years, quite frankly. When we do something really positive, very quickly you're just waiting for us to shoot ourselves in the foot. We're not even losing worldy goals. And that's the biggie as well. We're not losing 25-yard screamers and wonderfully worked ones. It's just like you could actually play teams from the Championship or below and give them a couple of corners against Rangers or whatever it would be, or some throw-ins, and we can't defend it. It's right. I'm going to stop now, Cammy, because you obviously have only got a limited period of time. But you know where I'm coming from, and as I say, every time it goes in as well, there's like a surprise. Somebody's either pointing at somebody else, and it's like, what do you do in training? I mean, if nothing else, I would have them in a week, and all I'd be doing is every day. Never mind all that other stuff. All we're going to do is, and you're going to have to learn how to defend. But these people should have learned that, Cammy, through their 12-year-old, 14-year-old, and so on. Anyway, I feel better now, mate. Yeah. Shite goal to lose again.
It is, but then, as we've kind of said before, this lack of accountability, that lack of
point
taking,
to someone else, even the experienced people used to hate it. Now, obviously, kind of Golson's gone in that, but it's when these experienced people then turn around and they're pointing on some of the newbies in that, Somebody put their hands up, and then even within the club as well, actually say, I'm sorry, Alan, you've done it again. You're meant to be doing this. Your key role is this. That's you failed, and actually taking them out of it. But I agree with you, yeah.
I think you're right. And listen, I'll spare the defence from taking sole accountability for that, because I've seen it throughout the midfielders, I've seen it throughout the team, where it is a case of there's a spare man coming through here, who's dealing with them, or you deal with them, or I'm just simply highlighting the fact that he's free and could be a threat. But
even the lead up, Cammy, to that corner, I think, was that the one where it kind of went through. Someone
Butland
put a challenge. Somebody nearly put in it. But it was, as you say, some of the lead up, the way Dundee United were just kind of walking through. But I agree with you. And how frustrating is that? Pointing at people. And I'll tell you another thing. If you and I are pointing together, and I've got one guy and there's somebody, and I'm screaming, Cammy, Cammy. See if you don't go, I'm still screaming. You see them pointing, the guys don't even look, and they still leave them. Just basic stuff. Yeah.
So Rangers were back involved. Only a few short minutes later, as we got the equaliser through a Cyril Dessers header. Now, there's a couple of things I want to talk about here, Alan. We might touch on a little bit more kind of holistic in terms of what we've seen so far over the course of the last few games, and certainly what we saw last night. This is an exceptional cross by Jeffrey that beats four men to find Cyril Dessers. He's in the kind of middle point, I would say, between the keeper and the back post, and it's a great header to finish.
He does a Derek Johnston. He basically just goes up there and goes, there you go, put them in here, no bother.
And it's a fantastic finish. Now, Dessers, I do want to talk about just for a little bit, because it's an interesting one. But this is a brilliant goal. It really is a great goal, and I appreciate that some purists might go, well, it's just a cross into the box, but it's the quality of the cross that's come in. Now, Jeffrey has not done well this season, so I don't want to say that this is all suddenly turned around and it's all sunshine and roses. But what last night I think showed me was, if you look at this goal, and we will talk about it in a little bit more detail, but if you look at this goal and the third goal that we scored last night, this team is capable of scoring good goals. There's quality in it. I think the problem that we have, however, is that we can create quality when we don't really have too much pressure. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying that it's not happened. It happened in the Celtic game at Parkhead. And, if I think about the game at Ibrox against them as well, and the Dessers goal following the step over, and we produced, again, the same against Aberdeen. And as much as I love to see it, and as much as I was so glad to be able to get back involved in the game, how competitive it was or otherwise is a separate conversation. It does come back into that element of that word that we talk about with frustration, because for me, if we could get something like that out of Jeffrey, then we've got a massive weapon, because that is a huge benefit. That's a huge, weapon in your arsenal to be able to whip in crosses like that and be able to try and find guys. Unfortunately, right now it's the exception rather than the rule because we have not seen enough of it from him. And my hope is, Alan, that in 6 to 12 months that we are sitting here talking about how key Jeffy is for us, because unless a deal is able to materialise, I believe he'll be at Ibrox next season. So I don't know if it's a confidence thing. I don't know if it's he can't take the pressure, and when the pressure's off, okay, fair enough. I'm not convinced of that because I've seen him continue sloppy play, even when the majority of the season has been done and dusted from a competitive perspective. But if we're able to keep him, and if we're able to use that as part of his attack going forward, I think it could raise some eyebrows.
Yeah, it's funny, and frustration is the word, because if I go back to the old firm, the one at Ibrox, the draw at Ibrox, obviously I think your main stand, I'm East Enclosure. Absolutely, it was at one point. It was like take him off. It was like Fernando Rickson that time I saw him at Parkhead when Mind We Dick took him off after 20 odd minutes or whatever.
When Bobby Peta was terrorising him.
And he couldn't do anything at all. He just looked, wee basic passes, things that you've seen him, he was quite comfortable with. And I thought the pressure's really getting to them. Myself and Big Del, who does the kind of railway bear, is right behind me. The conversation we were having as well is defensively, we always knew, well, he kind of loses his man behind. He's kind of flaws there, but we're expecting more. In the Celtic game, he didn't do it. He had umpteen chances, and then he did that kind of cut back in again rather than do it. But as you say, he's obviously got it. But there must be something, as you say, in terms of the old when maybe the pressure's on. And I think this we can extend this from Jefte to he's young laddie as well. It's the old, it'll take time and so on, and hopefully he will come on and he'll flourish. But if you extend that to across the team as well, I think a lot of it's to do with that. And it's okay having these, they're not dead rubbers because you're playing for Rangers, but when the league's gone or things, and people maybe tend to relax and do a wee bit more. But when you need this, Cammy, it's those Saturdays where we're playing and Celtic are playing after us. And if we can keep the points up, we put pressure on them, or they've dropped one, it's that type. That's when we seem to be failing. This whole kind of, I don't know, this kind of psychology of it, when they really feel the pressure. But as you say, when it frees up, some of the football they play, it's just like night and day. And it's the same in Europe. When you think of most of the European games, apart from the last one, I've said before, even people in England and so on will look at Rangers and they'll think, geez, so good team, look at the way they move it about and so on. But I wonder whether it's that we're kind of, the pressure's off a wee bit because it's a massive game, but we're underdogs and no one's really expecting it. I don't know. But no, he's definitely got something, But and as I say, I think again because he was young. Now, if this was like Tav, now if Jefty had been there for 6-7 years or so, on different conversation. But it would be smashing if they can just get the guy to develop a wee bit. But again, we need to look at that whole defence as well, Cammy.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think that this brings me on to my next point, and it's related to the second goal. It comes from a penalty. Mohamed Diomande goes down from a challenge from Will Ferry. I have absolutely no idea how referee Callum Scott did not see this in real time. No. He wasn't interested in the penalty. He then gets called over to the monitor. Takes a little bit of a while, I think, and what for me is quite a clear foul because he boots Diomande in the leg and causes him to go over. Mm-hmm. Again, I want to be completely fair. I have been critical of Diomande because I think at times he struggles with the physicality of the Scottish game, but this is a clear penalty. There was one earlier on where I think it was a bit of a coming together with Dessers. There's a little bit, if I'm being honest with you, what I dislike about Dessers when he gets these types of fouls is the theatrics afterwards.
Yeah, actually, I felt he had the chance to shoot with his right foot.
I agree. Yeah. However, the penalty is given. James Tavernier, in a very magnanimous decision, decides to give it to Cyril Dessers. Dessers is able to put it away. That's his 28th goal of the season, Alan, and his 50th for Rangers. Now, I've said this before, we could have a 20-pod series on our Patreon site about Cyril Dessers. But what I want to just probably have a little bit of your kind of thoughts around there's plenty of people who are still within a pro Dessers camp. There is the valid argument to say, if we get rid of Cyril Dessers, and there's plenty in that camp too, to say, okay, how do we replace his goals? Now, the obvious answer to that I've seen and heard, and that I somewhat agree with, is, okay, just buy a better player. I think you just have to look back at Rangers' recent history and recruitment to say that's far, far easier said than done.
Yes. Yeah.
So when I'm talking about guys like Jeffy, and when I'm talking about, Cyril Dessers, if these guys are here next season, let's say we don't get offers in for them and they are here next season, because we are not going to be able to have such an overhaul that we get rid of, the vast majority of the current crop. There are players who absolutely deserve to go and should not be here next season. But if these guys, if you're to look at Dessers in terms of his numbers, in terms of what he's contributed, there is justification to say, well, actually, I wouldn't look to expedite your sale as much as I would player A, B, C, D, right? Now, my wondering is we're going through the managerial recruitment just now. Obviously, David Ancelotti has been a name very much touted within the papers. I do not believe that the perfect candidate exists. So we want someone who knows the Scottish game. There isn't any good enough Scottish managers, as far as I'm concerned, or ones that I would want at Ibrox. We want to be able to play fast attacking football. Okay, yeah, we can do that. But we also need to make sure that we win the bread and butter domestic games, because where the squad has let everybody down is being able to deal with Motherwell, Hibs, St Mirren, the list goes on.
Yes.
So if a manager is able to come in and he's able to coach these players and been able to try and get more out of them, the Dessers one is easy. What you're really looking for there is to say, can you be more clinical? Because even against Dundee United last night, he was able to do, turns and shots. He was unlucky with a couple that went by the post. He generates so much conversation because he's offered chances that he misses more than he scores, but he does score. So if he was continually missing, yeah, fine, that's a straightforward conversation, because you're saying he's not good enough, get him out the door. But then you can look at his numbers and say, well, actually, where do we get 25 goals next season, guaranteed? So I suppose my question really around that is, when you look at guys like Jeff, if we do think that we are going to keep him, and we do think that there's no real reason to chase him out the door unless we can get a suitable replacement, can a coach come in and help elevate the existing players that we've got, as well as bedding in the new intake?
Yeah, I think I would go with that. I think we need to see if it is, say, Ancelotti, but as you say, there's on that, by the way, just on this one, I know people are going, he hasn't managed and so on, but I mean, the experience that he has had, and he has been coaching, and if you think of, is it kind of Napoli, Bayern Munich, obviously Real Madrid, as well. I'm actually all for that. If that's what they decide to go with, as you say, we need to look at this whole the Scottish thing and how do we do it at Fir Park and whatever. But other people, if you look at them, Walter knew the whole Scottish game. Walter had been assistant to Jim McLean, obviously, and then to Souness before he kind of stepped up. So kind of he's new too. People like Vincent Kompany as well, didn't really have a lot of them now. I think is it Danny Rowe? I think he's maybe once or something like that at Sheffield Wednesday, but that's about all. Mikel Arteta, okay, again under a wonderful manager, but he actually stepped in, so it is always going to be a risk. But under Ancelotti as well, under his father, he's going to have picked up a lot of experience. But so getting back to that, so Biggie for me is, here we go, Alan rambles again. The most important thing now is the Stenson thing, the Thelwell, the director of football, the actually having the kind of the recruitment proper, having the training. All of those blocks need to be there now under this new structure. Then whoever goes into that coaching, whether it's Ancelotti or whoever else, okay, they go in, they've got this key part, and obviously they try and develop, as you say, that we'll try and develop, whether it's UFD or if Dessers is there, can you get them from 1-8, to maybe 1-4 or 1-5 or whatever, but can you improve those players? If you can't after a certain period of time, then potentially you're looking at January. Could we maybe get rid of those people if we haven't done it? If the manager ultimately can't coach as well and things go a bit pear-shaped, don't change the whole blooming shebang, though. Then ultimately, maybe in a year, 2 years, then you're going to have to change the coach. But keep it's so important now for Rangers that the rest of the structure has to actually stay there. We don't then let's go back to Michael Beale. There's the keys, do what you want, pish, so I think as long as in this organisation, what they're putting in as well, Cammy, it's going to be so much more professional, the whole business thing. So in terms of like you as well, there are certain players that will still be able to develop. Hopefully Bailey Rice as well. Even if we Barry, who knows a wee bit about midfielders, there are players that will come on. There's definitely other ones that we've got to hunt. Either they've never really been good enough, and that in itself has impacted as well. And we're talking about Desser's 28 goals. Potentially in a team, Cammy, that was set up differently with far more talent and more of those crosses coming in accurately, he could maybe have done a bit more.
There's elements of it, yeah, you're right. There's elements of it where what we're really boiling this down to is the more technical aspects of the game. So better finishing, better crossing, and fundamentally better quality.
And that becomes coaching and development.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And there's elements of that, and again, where we've got the criticism for Barry Ferguson, I want to give him the praise because I think you've seen a development within Nico Raskan. I think a lot of that. Yep. I think a lot of that has come from Ferguson. He spoke a few days ago about the conversations that he and Raskan has had. Probably some pretty, I'll say heated conversations. Let's put it like that. But I get it. So I understand. I don't think you have to have been, I don't think you have to have been a striker to help a striker play, etc. But Ferguson was one of the greatest midfielders this country's ever produced. So he knows what he's seeing and what, can be done better. However, that's probably a great point that you've raised in terms of why we have got such a fervour around who we want to be able to bring in as manager, because it's totally understandable. So I'm not criticising anyone for it. I'm the same. I don't believe, as I say, a candidate exists that galvanises the support. No. Even when we've heard people talking about Steven Gerrard, I've had fans say to me, I get it, but is he going to come back with the same level of passion? Sometimes someone of that aura comes in, and he's an absolute presence. There's no doubt around that. I've spoken to so many people who have been in and around Rangers with Steven Gerrard there, and everybody says the same thing. He's just a presence. That he's a global icon in football, and so you absolutely understand why that is. But he also came in his first, top tier professional, a top tier managerial role. He had the hunger, he had the desire, and it didn't work out for him straight away. So it was obviously a process. So that lends into your point that there has to be time.
And we also need to as well. My important one today is there's going to have to be time, and let's not be already drafting up banners for October. Everyone, no, seriously as well. And I don't mean I'm settling for anything. Second best, here we go, Alan again. But for goodness sake, this major thing that's going to come, let's not get to the end of September and go, we're 7 points behind Celtic. This guy's not working. Come on.
I think, I agree with that, because again, I think we need to be patient. It may not, and I think I said this a couple of weeks ago in Extra, actually, that we're not going to get it all right in this transfer window. Well, I don't think we'll get it all right in January either, because historically, I think the winter window is, very, very, very hit or miss. So you're right. There is a rebuild happening, and that rebuild will take time. And I think that probably what you saw with Gerrard just in the run up to COVID, there was frustration, but there was progress. And I think if we can see progress, then I think Rangers fans will accept it. However, something that I've kind of been reflecting on a little bit is that whilst I understand it can be tough for people to be mega positive, shall we say. And it's not everyone, because I've seen loads of positivity around, a couple of names that have been linked in with the manager's job. But it's difficult for us to be able to instill faith in it because of recent history. So that's totally understand. Again, like you say, I will never, ever argue the point with that. What I would ask those people, though, is that based on everything that you've just said in terms of the structural changes that are coming in, I think that we are now past the point for a lot of the players within the current squad that if they leave in this, upcoming next few weeks, that there won't be too many tears shed. And I include stalwarts in there, guys like James Tavernier, because we understand that it's a time for change.
He's run his course.
Yeah,
He's applied
so
himself as best as he can and so on. But everyone, I mean, Sandy Jarman, whatever it would be, there comes times, even with great Rangers players, you're right.
yeah, and that for me is why we probably have to look at it from a different angle, because that structure and those managers that were spoken about, so well, not you talk about, Clement, Van Bronckhorst, Beale, whatever the list has been, they've not had this structure. What it does need to be doing, this is not a revelation to anyone, but what it does need to also do within that is have the recruitment that follows it to be able to bring in a squad, because that
Yes.
has been an issue, and Barry Ferguson has paid the price for that as far as I'm concerned, because
Mm-hmm.
it's clear that he has players in that squad that he knows that he can trust, but certainly players that he doesn't. And so if we can fulfill the squad with a better level of player that's capable of winning the league domestically, I don't think that it's a massive stretch. I don't think that
No,
we're going to have to spend tens of millions to be able to try and make it happen. But this new manager coming in will have probably more of a settled setup than the last few.
I think so. And as you say, I think, okay, there'll be people already going, it'll only take a couple of signings because we've shown we can compete with Celtic, and we can, absolutely. But it's the bigger picture as well, and how we do with the other ones. But no, you're right. And I think the other key as well is, so even say we get someone who's their first official coaching, manager, whatever they call it, and then he goes on, ultimately, if everything else is working in our organisational structure now, and we've got this pipeline coming in of developed, young players, or we're finding these nuggets again from, Egaman or whatever, unknown, for very small fees, and we're doing that whole trading model. If that's all going well and Rangers are playing good football and we're progressing, ultimately, see if in a couple of years' time, if this guy ends up wanting to go to somewhere else, what you then do is you're getting someone else, Cammy, who goes in and say, Cammy, this is your role, but you're not having to rejig everything else in that organisation. You just need a really good coach and, development again. And again, not someone who's taken 5 people away with them and the recruitment people, and that's the key that Rangers, I think, need to get to for certainly going from short to medium to a long term. And sounds pie in the sky, but the Ajax thing of years and years past and so on. We ultimately need to be getting to that. We can't keep doing this kind of firefighting. Let's try as best as we can. We've got a bit of money. Let's do this. Oh, it's changed. It's really got to be far better organised. And God, I'm sounding a wee bit optimistic, and I do think, based on what I've seen anyway, there's always a downside. I think things are looking better, Cammy,
Well, we even went to the extent, Alan, of being able to release a new top, and we didn't lose the game. So that already is a positive. But I want to finish off just talking about the Dundee United game, purely just because it would be remiss of me not to talk about
goal?
The third goal, and obviously some player involvement in there as well. The third goal is a cracker. It's a great pass through by Czerny, which is weighted perfectly. Raskin does the thing that I think that we've all been kind of crying out for, which is he takes a first-time shot, lashes it into it. Nico Raskin, I think, has developed brilliantly. And as I say, I give some praise of that towards Barry Ferguson. We will be lucky, I think, to keep a hold of this young man across the course of the next season. For me, if James Tavernier does leave, Nico Raskin, for me, is natural successor as captain. He has stepped up to the plate in that regard before, and I think he's acquitted himself well. But what I also want to talk about is that it's been interesting to see that Ferguson was asked around the involvement of Oscar Cortez. Cortez came on with Danilo last night, replacing Egaman and Czerny. The aforementioned Bailey Rice came on with about 7 or 8 minutes to play. I'm probably at the stage as well where I can understand why he's not been selected, because I do have faith in Ferguson to say if he's not been performing well enough in training, he doesn't get played. And if Ferguson has been here for an interim appointment and he wants to be able to win games, I understand as to why he's not selecting players who he feels are not doing enough to be able to merit getting in the squad. I think that should be a standard rule.
Because Ferguson, he's definitely looking for the best possible outcome for Rangers, and if he honestly thought Cortez was going to add to that, you're right, Cammy. He would have been in, wouldn't he? Yeah.
And that's probably the thing that I would also echo. And as I say, we've had a great chat about it, but it is also about that patience. Cortez will be here next season. Once we complete the deal now, theoretically, it's entirely possible that, we complete the deal and then ship him out someone loan or, sell him on. He may not play again for Rangers, but I think the likelihood is that he will. And this is probably where he, with a few of the players, I think, who are going to be here next season, who are here currently, they just need to wipe the slate clean. There will be big changes at the club. There will be demands placed on them from all areas, which I absolutely understand and totally accept. I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. If you play for Rangers, you should have high demand. What will be interesting for Cortez for me next season, Alan, will be if his attitude has been questioned or his effort or his application. If a new manager comes in and it's a new season and we're in a new dawn, then he has the opportunity to turn that around. Whether he does or not now solely rests on his shoulders.
Yes, I would agree. It's purely up to him if he's got any personal pride in whatever he's got to. It links back to their coaching thing as well. Here's a pool of players that you've got to maximise them and so on. But going forward as well, we can't have a repeat where we know players they're not performing to the right standard at all. They're consistently making. That's when, if the coaching thing's right, these people end up out, Cammy, and other people get in, because we've been playing games, where half a dozen of them at times and so on. We're like, it would be great if someone else could actually come in. But no, I agree full-hearted. I mean, Cortez, I think, is upwards of maybe 4 million anyway. And the thing is, even yesterday, we were looking at it, you're like 10 million, Danilo and him, just coming off the bench. Linked to what you've said about Nico Raskin, who I think's coming on phenomenally well. The big challenge that we do have is if the likes of Sevilla or someone come in and offer something upwards of 15, 20 million quid, it may be a case of learn from the Morelos, Ryan Kent one. And if you get, really good kind of fees or offers from clubs for the likes of him and maybe even Igaman, we may end up having to take them. My preference would be the ones that are really good. We keep these nuggets, But what I don't want, Cammy, then is things dipping in 6 months or 8 months again, as before, because that whole player trading model thing doesn't. It has to be get as much as you can, and then hopefully what we've got, look for some more nuggets and from other players to then get a better return on investments and things. But Nico Raskin, this year's been, his attitude, I think, has been exceptional. A real captain. He'd fight with anyone. He's turned into a wee Alec McDonald already. Yeah.
Listen, if he turns in to have the same success as Alec McDonald,
as we did it off, God,
yeah, absolutely. Alan, we'll wrap up then with the final game of the season. Hallelujah, it is here as Rangers head to Easter Road to see out a Hibs team that's solidified third place. It's a 12:30 kickoff, so hopefully for anyone going to the game, it'll be a nice wee sunny day out in the capital. But I know we were saying before about there's nothing much left to play for, and there isn't dead rubbers when you play for Rangers, but I think this one kind of does fall into that category. For me, as we've mentioned, the lineup will be interesting. I hope that this is where Ferguson will give the chance to guys like Cortez, Bailey Rice, Finlay Curtis, etc. And I honestly believe that we're already at the stage now, if we look back on the Barry Ferguson legacy as Rangers manager, that I think the fans will accept the fact that he's come in, he had limitations, and he did what he could, right? I think that's fair to say. Him and the management team that he brought in, they did what they could with the squad that they inherited, and the changing state of the club is probably fair to say. He can sign off, hopefully, with a win against Hibs. But for me, more than anything else, it is about being able to try and keep an involvement in with some of these players who will be here next season, who we see as obviously youth prospects, being able to try and give them that experience. I still think that there is a lot to be gained through experience, and whilst I understand that the game won't be mega competitive because there's nothing to play for really either team, so Hibs may approach it in very much the same fashion. It's still a good exposure to a good domestic team. Hibs are, they're going to finish third. They had an interesting season themselves. Started pretty poorly and they've recovered and finished well. But this will be where my hope is that if Ferguson does bring some of these players in, it gives them a taster of what we are hoping that they will get more involvement in next season and be able to get a comfortable win at an away ground, but also against a team that will look to be able to try and continue on its success from this season.
Yeah, it's a great learning experience going to Easter Road. They'll be, as you say, although even the last game of the season, they're playing Rangers, so you know what the kind of attitude of the Hibs players will be, and it's really good for these young guys in terms of learning experience in a team with more experienced Rangers players too, and it'll also give them a wee boost as well, thinking, well, I managed to get on, get more minutes there, and that should then help them leading if they're staying around in terms of the kind of pre-season and kind of going forward. So, as you said, there's never I know the dead rubber, but it doesn't matter what Rangers are playing. We're all the same, aren't we? I think we saw a game a couple of weeks ago where we were saying, well, it doesn't really matter. Within about 10 minutes, we all turn into, it matters, So hopefully these guys will, they'll kind of get more experience. The other ones as well have kind of been on the fringes too. Maybe see, a wee bit more of those guys too. So, yeah. A bit of sunshine. As I say, my tunnel, when I'm looking at it in future, it ain't going to be a train. It's just going to be a big step forward into some real exciting times for us now, Cammy, and we can really get ourselves back to where we should be, yeah.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Well, listen, that will do us for this week, and that will do me for season 24-25 on Extra. David will be back with the flagship on Monday to unpack the game at Easter Road. If you still want all of your Rangers content, please head on over to our Patreon site, which is patreon.com/heart and hand. We will be here through every single day of the summer, and what hopefully will be a very, very exciting summer of change at Ibrox as well. So please head on over to our site. You will get daily updates on there, as well as fresh daily content covering all things Rangers, the wider world of football, and some other things maybe non-football related that we do for some laughs around here. I'd just like to thank everyone for listening across the course of this season. It's been great to be able to talk to you about, albeit not a great season for Rangers, but again, we've stayed true to course as we always do as Rangers fans. It's been a privilege and an honour to be able to talk to you all about it as things go. I'll maybe come back in with a few free shows across the course of the next few weeks, maybe talking about season reviews and, various different bits of news to be able to come on to. But before I go and thank our producers, Mike Lee and Paul Myers, for their support across the course of the season, I also want to thank everyone who's come on to Extra to come and give me a hand talking about all of this. There's been some tough conversations. However, one man always answers the call. Despite his tea time, he always knows that he can put down the driver to come on and talk about Rangers with me. Alan, thank you so much for all of your help across the course of this season, and also being my final guest.
No, I've really enjoyed it, and it was great that you kept the best guest to the last as well.
Absolutely.
As you say, we've had some toughies, haven't we? How the hell can we not win away from home? How the hell can we not win domestically? But we've been through it. It seems like 4 years, Cammy, of a season. But again, I've really enjoyed being on. It's smashing, just talking about the Rangers with you, pal. So, and as I say, hopefully onwards and upwards now.
Yeah, absolutely. Things are getting better, folks. That's my promise to you as we head into season 25-26. I'll be back with you soon. David will be back with you on Monday. If you're heading to Edinburgh on Saturday, have a brilliant day, and we'll speak to you soon. Thanks, folks. Bye-bye.